Welcome to the Thriving Mayor Show. Conversations with people making the biggest difference in the quality of living in our towns and cities, including former and current mayors and other special guests. Each interview features their wisdom, unique perspective, stories, and experiences shared in a casual conversation. Join us and comment on social media as we meet another leader in the life of our urban places. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Hubicki. I'm the host of the Thriving Mayor Show. It's October 20th, 2021, and I'm very, very happy and honored today to welcome back to the show former mayor and author George Koff. How are you today, George?
Excellent. Doing well.
Great. And I just want everyone to know how much I appreciate George's speedy answer to my request to come on the show, and we actually just organized it about 60 minutes ago. So it's the beauty of the virtual world and being so gracious. And thank you so much, George.
You're welcome entirely.
Yeah. I'll begin the show by honoring the land and the Indigenous peoples who've lived here from the beginning. I'm grateful for the opportunity to live here and thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years in the Bay of Quinte. In particular, I honor the ancestors of the land, the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. This territory is covered by the 1783 Crawford Purchase. I'd like to just read a little intro that I cobbled together for George. George Koff has a Canada-wide reputation amongst municipalities, Crown agencies, and other public sector bodies as advisor, consultant, and author on the art and principles of governance and the elements of effective organizations. His background includes a Bachelor of Arts in Recreation Administration and work experience in banking, oil and gas, recreation administration, environmental protection, local government, and the private sector. He's been involved in various aspects of local government since his days as a youth advisor and playground leader in the 70s for the city of Edmonton. He's since applied his academic and experiential observations to his role as advisor to numerous small and large public sector organizations across Canada. He's published over 450 articles, as well as, I think, 11 books now. Do I have that right? 10. It has 3 how-to books, Koff's Guide Volumes 1 and 2, as well as Executive Policy Governance, which was published in 2014. He also has 3 books of articles in an off-the-cuff series published by Municipal World. A book of fictional stories, Life in the Trenches, set in the world of local government, and his book, Leading, The Real Role of Mayor and Council, was released in 2019. And the last time George was on the show was our episode number 9 on February 3rd of this year, when we talked about his latest book at the time, Tucker Goes to City Hall. So, how time flies, George. It was 8 months ago that you were on the show first. A lot's happened. Well, a lot hasn't. How are things in your neck of the woods?
You know, the world has changed, obviously, for all of us. And in my case, it's changed because I now do a truckload of webinars for large and small municipalities. The advantage, of course, is that I have a broader reach probably than I did before because I was cutting back on my travel requirements. And now I did a session for the Prince Edward Island municipalities. Yesterday, I was on a session for the cities of Moncton and Dieppe and the town of Riverview in New Brunswick. So, next week I'm doing stuff in Abbotsford, but in that case, I'm there live. And then I start up a whole series of orientations for new councils in Alberta because their election is October the 18th. And as of the 20th, I'm starting about 20 one-day seminars across Alberta and up into the Yukon. So there's a lot of work ahead. There's been a fair bit of work behind. So in my downtime, I guess I start to think about what could I write about. And I've come up with a couple ideas. One was, of course, the Tucker book, which I think is a great read for children.
Yeah.
And should be made available to every school in Canada. It's a great primer for local government classes. And the one that I most recently published, but Municipal World has just published, is called The Mayor. And it probably represents my my best foray into what I think the mayor is all about. It's a critical position, obviously, one that I was honored to hold for 12 years in my own community. I left just before the public asked me to, so I managed to survive in those days 4 elections because the elections were 3 years each. In any case, it was a wonderful experience. I ended up being president of the municipalities of Alberta and subsequently the municipalities of Canada, both of which are high honors and
Wow.
days that I cherish and memories that I esteem.
Wonderful. And how did you know they were about to not elect you?
Well, I wasn't, and in fact, it was more a discussion between my wife Arliss and I about whether or not I liked being mayor or being married, and so the choice was I think I'll try to stay married,
Yeah.
which we have for 42 years, and
Well, congratulations.
yeah.
And I think it's one of your last chapters, George. You have the chapter summary questions that, there's called summary questions. And one of the bullet points is like, how does a mayor know when to step down? And a lot don't. They don't know when to leave.
Yeah, I think there was exceptions to the rule. So Hazel McCallion in Mississauga would be an exception to the rule. George Ferguson in Abbotsford was an exception to the rule. There are some, but not many.
Yeah.
In most cases, when you're starting to run out of ideas as to why you should serve another term, other than wanting to satisfy yourself or stay out of the house or whatever, there has to be a good reasons. And in my mind, if you've accomplished what you said you wanted to accomplish, then maybe it's time to step aside and let somebody with a new agenda. You aren't the only person in the community that can lead. So maybe it's opportunity for somebody younger, somebody wiser, somebody with different kind of experience, somebody certainly with a different agenda. So creating an opening, I think, is wise. In any case, I think being the mayor is a wonderful opportunity for leadership. But you can also become a roadblock after a certain period of time.
Yeah, and one of the aspects of being a strong leader or a magnetic leader, I think, is vision, and we'll talk a little bit more about vision later in the episode. But so true. So tell us, George, a bit more about Tucker Goes to City Hall. Are municipalities and school boards starting to introduce us now a bit more?
So far to date, I probably would confess that I've been a little bit disappointed. I don't know the exact numbers from Municipal World in terms of sales. It's difficult to crack into the schools market. But when I realized how many times I'd been invited to speak during local government week and how little teachers and students knew about local government, to me, this book is an excellent primer for somebody that knows virtually nothing, including most parents, by the way, who go and vote on the basis of what yard sign they saw the most frequently. So, you just look at some of this and think there's a prime opportunity for both mayors of municipalities when they're being asked to go and speak at a local school or counselors, take the book along with you. And if your municipality can afford it, hand one out for every student to take home. I mean, that's a marvelous gift. The other is school boards, who I think are short on that kind of material. So I could be wrong, but I doubt they're going to find anything that creates more of an interest and a good, catchy story that this is. And that has a series of observations and questions that people could pursue in the classroom. So hopefully it catches on. I think it will. It's fairly new in the early days yet, but hopefully it'll catch on.
Yeah, and having read it as well, like I could see it's super valuable for parents or even other adults who are just want to get an introduction into municipal government, city hall, and how the city is run. It's just there's just so little information,
right?
And information that's objective and factual nowadays that we can draw upon to inform ourselves. So yeah, congratulations on the book, and I'm really hoping as well that it does gain some traction and the kids can benefit from it and hopefully also then be inspired.
Yes.
Last episode was the British Columbia Council for International Cooperation, and we had 3 young women who just all recently completed their university degrees, and they had just written a toolkit called the Climate Justice Toolkit for Municipalities for Canada, and we're super inspirational. And it's this kind of these kinds of people that are committed and dedicated and have all the energy and enthusiasm to show us really how, what can be done. And I think Tucker Goes to City Hall is another excellent example of a resource that young people can use and get inspired with. Yeah. One of the quotes I'd like to read from your introduction, I really admire it. And it says, "The ideal mayor may not exist, but if one does, they will exhibit many of the attributes I cite. At the conclusion of their career, the ideal mayor may see community and not self, challenges that became opportunities, and will sense a quiet feeling of pride in having been a part of a successful effort. Each one will be thankful for the journey." And for me, that is such a profound statement, and that it is this journey. And a mayor is the pinnacle, the leader of this municipality. And every single municipality, every single person, every single employee, every person that visits is part of that journey. And the mayor has this incredible role and opportunity along their journey, whether it's a 3 or 4 year or part term, to influence that. And George, what is that? What do you feel when you wrote that?
I think too frequently people go through a term of office and leave and don't spend any time thinking about, so what was accomplished, what was done. They might think in terms of some specifics, i.e. a building was built,
right,
a new program was launched, a new institution was started, whatever. But they won't think deeply about, so what was the impact on the community of our term of office? Did we raise the bar from the previous term? Did we do something that people could build upon? I mean, I'm credited with all kinds of things in Spruce Grove from our term, because I started when we were a very small community and helped move it into a much larger domain, including becoming a city.
right.
But a lot of what we accomplished on the shoulders of the previous mayor, a fellow by the name of Ken Howery, who since passed away, and his colleagues. So, each mayor subsequently has done certain things, and I credit them with that. And I think they should take comfort in the fact that you've increased and encouraged and developed the community and left a part of yourself at the table. All of that is worthwhile looking back on. Don't spend too much time patting yourself on the back, because hopefully others, if you're deservedly, they will do that. But I just think it's encouraging to be able to look around and say, how did I serve mankind? How did I contribute a part of my day? And of course, in my case, it was largely voluntary, because I had a full-time consulting role, which I still have. And so the advantage that I had is that I slid from one realm into the other, because I was doing consulting virtually full-time when I was mayor. So, and that's the beauty of a small community, is that you can do both. Now our mayor is full-time.
Yeah.
The salary is obviously considerably different than when I was being compensated as mayor, which it became simply an irritant with regard to filing tax returns. But it was a voluntary contribution. It was you received a financial pat on the back. And I'm not denying the fact that larger communities require more full-time direction and assistance. That creates its own problems, by the way, because mayors often believe that their job is to come in and manage and direct the administration.
Yeah.
And therein lies probably one of the biggest problems for local governments across Canada, is the lack of role clarity. So anyway, I've answered probably more broadly than you wanted me to, Michael.
Yeah, that's probably questions 8, 9, and 10 as well. But thank you for that depth. Tell us a little bit about writing this book, George. The seed of the idea, how you kind of came up with the chapters, and you got some excellent, really interesting input from numerous mayors from across Canada. So it's really curious about your thought process and how you kind of picked the topic and then went through that writing process?
Yeah, I think the first article that I wrote, the first major article that I wrote was called The Role of the Mayor in Alberta, and it was done for the Faculty of Extension, University of Alberta. I think it's still available. I certainly have a couple of copies. And everything since then has built on that in terms of what did I see the role of the mayor being. And the language has changed somewhat, Michael. The actual roles haven't changed all that dramatically. The conditions have changed. Social media has had an impact. All of those things impact the role of the mayor. But I thought nobody's really put together what I would consider to be a good explanation of what is this role all about and where can they find that. You could go right across Canada and you can see what the legislation says, which is very scant about what the role of the mayor is. And then even that's been misinterpreted. And so you ask for an article about what's the role of the mayor. I'll guarantee you they're going to be looking to people like Municipal World and saying who's written what lately on this topic. So hopefully this book called The Mayor will be the go-to book for the next number of years in terms of what is this mayor's role all about. I expect people will add to it and maybe subtract from it, but that to me is a summary piece, if you like. I might do one more that I've got in the back of my mind, but you start with this thought and then I put together some ideas on paper. And then I thought, the way to make this come alive, it's like reading any other book that I've read, and I've got a ton of them on my bookshelves. I find myself gravitating toward the example, gravitating toward here's a quote from somebody else, or here's a life story that would make all of this come real. And the way to get the life stories is I reached out across Canada to about 20 different mayors, some of which I picked off the top of my head mostly, or ones that I had dealt with and so on in previous worlds. And I contacted them and said, here's what I'm doing. I want a quote from you of, such and such a length, preferably not to exceed. I allowed some latitude in that, but here's an area that I want you to discuss. And largely it was around how does the mayor show real leadership as opposed to simply following along with council or following the management. Where are the opportunities where the mayor gets to lead? And in each case, they wrote back to me and gave me a local example ranging from Toronto to some very smaller community in Newfoundland, around where does leadership kick in? Because the mayor, as you know, is limited in what they can do individually. But what they have is what's called moral suasion, moral powers, that allows them as a mayor to provide guidance and leadership to the community. So, there's there was an opportunity for people to contribute. Ironically, I had several that were caught up in the COVID dilemma, and so they didn't. They might regret that now when they see the book called The Mayor and other people are reading it and all the nice quotes that are in there. But I'm very much indebted to those that contributed to the book.
Great. So thank you for that answer, George. Do you have a favorite chapter in the book?
Oh, that's a tough question. Generally, my favorite chapters are the starting point and the end point. In this case, probably one of the most telling ones for me personally, but probably for every mayor that I deal with, is who are you at home?
Yeah.
You can walk out into the community, out the front door, you're in the public eye. My wife used to joke and say that I cut the grass with my suit on. Yeah. And I would say it's because the neighbors are going by with people in the back seat. The people in the back seat are from out of town. And the neighbors are saying, that's our mayor. So I didn't want to be out there in scruffy shorts and a T-shirt. Anyway, it's a humorous dig at sort of when are you off stage? And we've since found out, of course, that we're still on stage because people still recognize you in the community as being the former mayor. People that I don't know from page 8, will come up and say something nice or be complimentary for the most part, or recognize you in a lineup. I tell this story, by the way, that the day after I stepped down from being mayor, of course, my head was still quite swelled. I had difficulty getting my body and my head into the same car. But anyway, I was down picking up pictures for my wife at the local photo lab. And the fellow looked up at me and he said, "Oh, I know you." And of course, my head continues to swell. Yeah. And he proceeded to write down the name of the mayor of the neighboring community.
Oh, wow.
So I thought it doesn't take long. And like one day, and my value, my reputation, my own self-esteem has just taken a tremendous hit. I never did tell the person about that, but I just thought that's a really good message to all of us in terms of putting your hand into the bucket of water and pulling it back out. I mean,
Yeah.
you do make an impact. There's no question. It's maybe less than you thought it was, or it may be more, depending on your ego. So.
Yeah, yeah. I really enjoy contemplating the summary questions. And one from that chapter on who you are at home is, can a mayor afford to shut off all communication devices when attempting to enjoy some private downtime? And now is so different from the old days, but
Yeah, I would argue that if you have set up the roles appropriately, and if you've made it clear to everyone that you're going on a 2 week or 3 week vacation to Europe or someplace which is relatively difficult to find you, that you should have the confidence necessary to shut everything off and go on your holiday. You might leave word with your executive assistant that if it's an absolute community emergency, here's how to reach me. And I think that that's legitimate. But what would constitute a community emergency would have to be fairly significant in order to be all that disruptive. I realize that if you're the prime minister and you take a holiday on the same day that you're proclaiming a national commission, you might run into some headwind. The average Canadian would say, no, it's legitimate to have a holiday. These are tough jobs. At least most of us
yeah,
would understand that they're difficult. I just know that wherever I went, that I was on display. And so whether you're going in the front gate of Disneyland, which happened, or sitting in the back row of a church in Jakarta, Indonesia, which also happened,
wow,
somebody knows you. Standing in the lineup at the Frankfurt airport, somebody's calling up my name from 10 rows back. You're on display. And I say that to people because I wasn't the most prominent person across Canada, but I was sure as heck getting recognized. And, so you just need to understand that you can't be in the middle of a brouhaha with somebody without somebody else recognizing who you are. So to me, it adds a real caution to what you do.
yeah, yeah. And in chapter 4, it's called Seven Character Frailties in an Ineffective Mayor. And one of them is, how is rigidity different than strong, solid leadership?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one that I pose in the book. And I think, it's fine to say you're a person of fundamentals. It's fine to say that you've got a particular course of direction that you want to see taken as a mayor. But you need to recognize that you have, as I said earlier, moral suasion, but you don't have dictatorial power. So council as a whole says, no, we ought to go in direction Y, and you're saying we ought to go direction A. The council as a whole takes precedent. You can try your argument during the council debate, but once a decision is made, a decision is made. And
Yeah,
that's the way it should be. A mayor that's mature, comfortable in their own skin, will understand that for the most part, they're probably quite capable of moving the public opinion and so on and getting council to move with them. But there is the odd occasion where the mayor's wrong, quite simply, and somebody else has got a better idea of how to do something. And I think you're wise if you simply accept it and move on. I said to somebody, could you challenge me after 12 years of a decision that was made where I voted against it? And the answer is nobody could think of it. And
yeah,
I said
wow,
there were a couple of occasions where that happened. And the distinction is that I learned early in life that if you want somebody to focus on your frailties, keep bringing them up. And so I just simply never brought up the fact that on a particular issue, I was outvoted. I just simply said, next item on the agenda,
yeah,
as though nothing had happened.
yep,
Did my
yep,
ego take a hit? Well, it probably did in that particular instance. But as a mayor, you have all kinds of informal clout. You have a voice that nobody else has. You have decibels that nobody else has as the mayor of a community. And you ought to use that judiciously. You ought to be very careful on how
right,
you utilize it.
yeah. I think the difference between being decisive and being rigid is also, there's a nuance there that you can still be decisive, but then if the vote goes against you, then you have to let go of the rigidity and accept that, as you say, the council's decided to go in a different direction.
Yeah, and quite frankly, and I've said this to any number of seminar audiences, I think as the mayor, once you said what you need to say, which I think the mayor, by the way, should sum up debate. I don't think the mayor should open it. I think the mayor should be entitled to sum it up. And somebody on the audience will say, well, that goes against Robert's rules. But quite frankly, Robert's rules don't apply in a municipality if you have your own procedural bylaw. And the
Right.
bylaw should say the mayor has the authority to sum up the debate and then indicate how he or she is going to vote. Well, to me, that makes all the sense in the world, because you then have some additional clout and oomph as the authority of the mayor, as opposed to sticking your neck out right at the outset and then everybody takes a shot at what the mayor recommends. To me, that makes no sense at all, and it reduces the clout and cachet of a mayor's voice. I think rigidity is when you can't understand that your council's going in a different direction
Yeah.
and you're refusing to follow them.
Yeah.
There's a great quote by Alexander Ledru-Rollin, a French philosopher, who said, "There go my people. I must find out where they're going so I can lead them."
Wonderful. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And the first bullet in chapter 3, which is 7 indispensable traits of an effective mayor. Of the 7 indispensable traits cited in this chapter, is there one that jumps out at you as absolutely essential for any mayor who wishes to be successful? To be successful, and some of them are sense of timing, bridge builder, high degree of personal integrity, comfortable with power, leadership ability, understanding the need for role clarity, and ability to communicate.
Yeah, I would argue that almost all of those could be put on an equal plane, and you could say any one of those in any particular circumstance might be your most significant trait. But I think the issue of personal integrity to me is front and center, simply because of the requests that I've had over the years to come in and investigate communities where personal integrity has been thrown out the window, and somebody in leadership position has thought that they could get away with a particular action that quite frankly shouldn't be tolerated. So to me, there was a great quote by, I think it was Norman Schwarzberg, the guy that was the leader of the Gulf War forces, 1990s, early 1990s,
Right.
For the U.S. And he said, leadership is a potent combination of strategy and character. If you must be without one, be without strategy. Interesting. Said the most powerful strategic leader of his era. He's saying, if you got to be without one of those two characteristics, throw strategy out the window and stick with character. It's the one thing you can take into a room and you can also carry out.
Yeah, amazing. We a recent guest was mentioning about an old Tommy Douglas speech, and Tommy Douglas came into the room. He put his wristwatch down on the podium. He talked for 59 minutes and 59 seconds with no notes. Just had the audience enthralled, and walked away. And talk about character.
That's an unbelievable talent. I had the same thing happen to me when I was a communications officer for a Crown Corporation involved in the environment. And I was taking the vice chair up to a public speaking engagement, Chamber of Commerce, the town of Slave Lake, Alberta. And on the way up, he said, "How much time did you say I had?" And I said, "You've got 25 minutes to make this address." He said, "Fine, that sounds good." And we got up there, and honestly, again, without referral to a note, Julian Kaniski, some people will remember the name Gene Kaniski, who was a world wrestling champion. Well, his brother Julian, who was similarly a big, strong guy, was brilliant and vice chair of this Environment Conservation Authority. And Julian spoke for 24 minutes and 59 seconds. I'm looking at my watch and I'm thinking, how is he going to pull this off? Because he was still in full flight at 22 minutes. And he put the whole thing back together and said, "Thanks very much." He was done. And I was marveling. I mean, I learned more lessons in leadership and chairmanship and presence. You ask where you picked that up from. I had a chair of that same authority that would say to me, "So we invited 15 members of the media to come for our opening session on this new inquiry they were doing." Said, "How many people?" I say, "It's about time to get started." He said, "How many people are there?" I said, 12. He said, "Call me into the room when there's 15. It was just like he was going to make his entrance when everybody's in the room. He wasn't going to get usurped or upstaged by somebody else coming in late. I thought, it
Wow.
was a remarkable technique, and he had control of the room the moment he walked in. So
Yeah.
there's some strategy in all of these things. And if you're the mayor, you realize you carry a presence with you, and you try to do nothing to diminish that.
Yeah. And that's the power of the conclusion, the power of the summary as
Yes.
well. Yeah. Super, super. And the last question that I thought was really interesting, especially now as we're hopefully coming out of the pandemic. But how was it possible for the mayor to be such a wise and compassionate leader in public and have such personal challenges and difficulties in their home life?
Yeah, the two are so closely married, it's very, very difficult to separate both. So it's a question of how the mayor can take on challenges that, quite frankly, seem above you. They seem like, how on earth we are going to wrap our heads around this one? How are we going to move the community forward against such obstacles? And those look like really overwhelming obstacles and difficulties. At the same time, the mayor is a human being. The mayor has family, presumably, and the mayor has the same kinds of difficulties. It's like a pastor looking out into the church audience on a Sunday morning, everybody looking freshly scrubbed, only except you realize that some of these couples have had the worst argument in years on their way to church. In fact, it might have even been the pastor and his or her wife. So, you look at that and you think, how on earth you try to separate the two when you have to, but a lot of it is a reflection of who you are personally. If you're a communicator at home, chances are you're going to be a reasonably good communicator in public.
Yeah.
If you can't put sentences together at home, I'm not sure how you're going to manage in a public office. I really don't.
No.
I've seen people do it, but they're very few and far between. John Crosby comes to mind from Newfoundland, who sat at a table that I was at over a dinner hour. We were being hosted when I was president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And he was quite quiet, and his wife was quite chatty. And we really enjoyed that, but he was quiet. And then they called him up to the microphone to bring greetings. And it was like the light bulb turned on, and John Crosby came alive, and he was usual funny self and over the top and so on. And so he managed to separate the two entirely and did it very, very effectively. Most people, if you're having a major battle with alcohol, for example, or drugs in your home life, that's going to show up in your public life, I'll guarantee you. People are
Yeah.
going to see stuff that you don't see, and they might be careful about how they say it to you. They'd be wise if they took you aside and said, Mr. Mayor or Madam Mayor, somehow this has to stop. Or this is a particular land deal that you're expressing a lot of interest in. I know that you're a part of this numbered company, and it'd be wise if you step back from this because you're going to get nailed at some point when people realize what just happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Integrity is so critical to the role of the mayor. When you blow that, you've lost almost everything. And there's all kinds of examples of that. I've done all-day seminars on ethics. There's lots of examples, the corporate world, public world, it doesn't matter, personal world. All of those things can happen and can absolutely bring somebody down in a tremendous fall. It takes a career to build yourself up to where you want to be. It takes one instance to take yourself down to where you don't want to be.
And it's so hard to regain and reacquire trust.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when I have council members go through a process of reviewing their CAO or city manager, the one fundamental question is, do you have faith and trust in this individual? Forget about all the other deliverables, all the other reporting, everything else. Do you have faith and trust in who your CAO is? And if the answer is a bit shaky, I'll guarantee you that person's gone within the year.
Yeah.
It's an absolute fundamental quotient of leadership is trust. And if you don't have that between you and whoever you're guiding and directing, this just simply doesn't work.
Yeah. Wow. What what would be one or two of your favorite mayor stories that you were given for the book?
Well, I was impressed by a number of them, but the one that stood out for me was the mayor of Toronto, John Tory, talking about having to respond to a shooting that happened on Yonge Street and having to do so in a very urgent manner. And I thought the way that the issue was explained was very thoughtful, very considerate, and also pointed out to where the mayor has to actually jump in and do something very effectively, very quickly. I think that that was significant. I also think that the one that was quite concerning to me was my own mayor, who's stepping down in the next couple of weeks. But my own mayor talked about having been challenged in derogatory terms by somebody on social media for quite a number of years. This went on, only to find out that the person that was doing that was a member of his own council.
Wow.
So to me, that's, I mean, how do you handle that? How do you deal with such a person when that's in front of you on a day-to-day basis? I mean, you're meeting that person day after day, week after week, and they're questioning your integrity, they're questioning your relationship with your spouse, all of that kind of stuff. To me, social media can become such a harmful weapon when used in the hands of people that are wrongly directed. So a lot of that wasn't available during my day as mayor. I mean, you had letters to the editor, you had public commentary, but nowhere near the focus that you have now. I've had whole
No.
councils step down because they can't handle social media and the drain that it is on them and their families. So, you know, in any case, there's a lot of good quotes that kind of that really support a particular issue. One out of Newfoundland where they were trying to get a certain project built and the mayor's hand was required in it. You know, you need to be a leader in circumstances where something's going south and you need to change the course of direction. There's lots of those examples in the book as well. So,
Yeah, wonderful. And you mentioned social media, George. What are some of the other challenges or issues that a mayor is facing personally as a person, as a member of the community, as the mayor of the town? And especially now in COVID and coming out of COVID, and I'm sure it's changed. Some of the mayors I've talked to have told me some of the issues like isolation, they're missing the discourse, the conversation about ideas and things like that. What are some of the other issues that you're finding that mayors are being challenged with personally?
But one of the challenges of being in isolation, which COVID has brought about, or the pandemic has brought about, is the fact that as mayor, you can start to take on more power than the office ever intended to take on. And you start to see yourself as the one-man band leading the chorus, the Hallelujah chorus, all following in line behind you. Well, that's not necessarily what's going to happen. And secondly, you run the risk of giving direction on things that you don't have the authority to direct. You're telling your city manager or CAO what to be done in certain circumstances. The CAO really should be appealing to the full council, not to you as mayor. So there are instances where that can happen. I think the isolation of you personally, where you're not getting feedback from other members of council in terms of, I think somehow that can impact your own sense of ego and presence and self-worth and all of that, which I think can become a major significant barrier. I also think that you, as mayor, through some degree of isolation, can end up losing contact with the very people that you purport to represent, and that's the citizens of the community. So unless you find ways to get out and about, which is increasingly difficult in a pandemic, prior to a pandemic, you could go down to the farmer's market, meet all kinds of folks. You could go to a social gathering and rub shoulders with all kinds of folks. You could even sit a little bit closer in a church service and talk to people afterwards. And now all of that is constrained. And so the vast majority of us will be quite delighted to come out of a pandemic and realize there is life beyond, rather than having our lives so constrained that every decision, every issue becomes magnified.
Yeah. Now, when a mayor wins the election, they may have had some experience in management or public relations or consulting or and other professional areas. But how do they dive into that to the role of mayor? And you talk a lot about role clarity. Is it? I think that there's Saskatchewan had a school for mayors for a couple of years, but I haven't heard of really anything else like that.
Yeah, there are programs that are offered by various provincial municipal associations. I know the Alberta one has an elected official education program that is going quite well. I think there are any number of orientations being done with new councils across Canada. People like me and others get involved in doing a half a term a reset, if you like, so that there is some opportunity to try to get across some of the basic messages. When you've got mayors who come in who are very strong-willed, who've done extremely well in their own practice, their own business, and then all of a sudden are in a position of being the mayor, it's sometimes very difficult to constrain such a person and say, look, these are the rules of the game. You don't get to make decisions on your own. It's why the system in Canada is called the weak mayor system. You don't have unilateral decision making. You've got to get a majority of council on side. So I suggest you do that before you think you've got everybody moving in the same direction. So people that come out of a business background start to think, well, what I'm going to do is dive in and look at the budget on a line-by-line basis as though somehow somebody's hiding something from you. Or I'm going to go out to the work site and see what the work is being done because I used to be a construction manager prior to stepping into the role of council. All these things have happened, by the way, and they ought not to, but they do because there's nobody pointing out that that's not the role of the mayor. You want to go to a work site, you want to take two things with you. One's a pot of coffee and the other's a bag of Timbits, and drop them off at the work site and then keep on going. Say good work and keep on going. Say nothing about the depth of the pipe because you're going to get it wrong anyway. They don't show how little you know by opening your mouth. So
my dad had a great quote for me growing up. It said, it's better to sit there and say nothing and have people think you're dumb than speak up and have them know you're dumb.
Exactly. To remove all shadow of doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, one of the Beatitudes that's not in there is, blessed are they that can have nothing to say and cannot be persuaded to say it. It's
wow.
The same thing.
Yeah. Beautiful. Did many of the mayors mention at all our climate situation or ecology and how cities are has such a significant role in changing sort of climate situation and adaptation? The Federation of Canadian Municipalities, I know as well, has a lot of programs. I'm just wondering, is that kind of rising up in mayors' thought process now and their directives for their cities?
I think the issue of climate change is becoming an increasingly significant issue just in terms of the amount of times it's referred to. The question then becomes one of what's the municipal response and authority? Is that something that's dealt with best by the federal government? Is it also dealt with by the provincial governments? And what's our role municipally? If the answer to the first two questions is yes, then what's the role of the municipality? Should we be providing attention to what we're trying to do to be environmentally conscious? I think that's absolutely critical. Let's see what you're doing that you can reflect and say, we are taking a stance as a municipality. Right. I think that's important. We're going to conserve the environment. We're going to try to make sure that we're passing on to future generations the fact that we've enjoyed the beauty of our landscape today. We're going to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're going to encourage, whether it's an energy resource company or whatever, we're going to encourage them to be as environmentally prudent as possible. And that's what's happening right across Canada. Being from Alberta, I know that oil and gas companies are far more environmentally conscious today than they ever have been. They've got very brilliant scientists working on how do we reduce emissions and so on. Right. And then you look at the situation worldwide and you put yourself into that circumstance and realize that we're nothing but a puff of wind by comparison to what other countries are doing. And, unless we get our heads around that, Canada is going to suffer more than most because we're an energy dependent country that has energy resources. And we see what's happening today in terms of the price of gas and oil going up. And we're saying, well, let's keep a cork in it. And we'll see how that goes. Well, the answer is not going to go very well. If you've got resources, we ought to be using them, but doing so in an environmentally friendly, environmentally conscious manner. Yeah, I think if people understood that trade-off, there would be a much more coherent discussion Canada-wide on that topic. So to me, it's an issue we ought to be aware of. It's an issue that municipalities should be recognized that they also have a leadership role to play. but you've got to make sure that you're doing it in a balanced fashion, or you're going to be hindering yourselves.
Yeah, exactly right. And with such limited at times resources from the upper tier governments, it puts undue pressure or strain on local
Yeah,
municipalities to try to
yeah,
deliver on something that maybe a lot of the residents would like to see something different, but how do you do it? It's just yeah,
yeah.
it's too tough. Yeah. Um, Are there? We're gonna wrap up pretty soon, George. It's just super interesting. Always talking to you. I just wondered, are there one or two other books that people considering for running for office, or just from a general interest perspective that you're reading or you've enjoyed recently that we could share?
There's a really good book by John Maxwell called The 21 Leadership Qualities. It's something to that effect. The leadership
Yeah.
21 Leadership Qualities, I think it is. It was an excellent read. It has little to do with local government. It has a whole lot to do with how to lead effectively. That I would recommend to anyone. The book by Charles Benz, I think it was, who I actually taught with at one course a long time ago in Nova Scotia. He wrote a very effective book on how to campaign for local government office. It was one of the earlier ones, but also a very effective one in terms of campaigning. I think the book by Tyndall, husband and wife, who have written on local government, is very effective as well. It's aimed at really a good thinking audience. It causes people to reflect on all aspects of local government. I'd recommend them as good authors, and one that people ought to be checking into. There's a whole series now on municipalworld.com that colleagues like Ian McCormick, a colleague of mine, has written. Who's Driving the Grader is a
Yeah.
great book on roles and responsibilities, and it's a common topic in rural Canada. So yeah, there are some resources now available that weren't available in the old days. I've got a whole series of videos that people have purchased from me that are 45 minutes long each, that you can play before a council meeting and get a better grasp on what it means to be a mayor or councillor. So
Oh
there are
wow. Yeah.
resources available, Michael. There's no reason why people across Canada shouldn't have access to at least some of them.
Yeah. And last question, George, getting back to vision. Did any of your mayors that responded mention that when they were stepping into this leadership, whether it was a crisis or situation, that they were able to reflect back upon the vision that they had shared with their council and the residents? And I just kind of wondering if mayors mention that at all.
Yeah, I may be mistaken in who I attribute this to, but I'm pretty sure it was the mayor of Moncton, Don Arnold, who made a valuable contribution or two into the text that talked about the need for community vision, the need for council to sense what the vision is for the community, to try to make sure that everything else is draped around that vision so that we're moving forward in a common direction. I thought, there were several that made reference to the fact that if it's the old biblical expression, without vision, the people perish. Well, like people that lack vision, any direction's okay and acceptable, except the problem is you make very little progress. You've got
Yeah.
to be able to say, what are the top 3 or 4 things we as a council want to accomplish? And we've got to be aiming toward those 3 or 4 things, because everything else looks interesting, but becomes nothing but a distraction. So the mayors that, in my mind, accomplish something are very firm in what they want to get done in their term of office. They know at the end of the day they're going to be judged on that basis. And so they effectively focus on those top 2 or 3 things that I want to say we move the needle on, so that I don't have to stand there and explain the 15 reasons why nothing went the way we wanted it to. So I think you need to be focused. There needs to be some sense of vision,
Yeah.
mission, priorities, annual objectives, all of the stuff you read about in planning documents. Those things are important, and they need to be tied to present day decisions.
Yeah, I love the way that Don Mayor Arnold tied it back to the community.
Yeah.
Let's find out what that community vision is.
Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful chat with you again, as always, George. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Just that I would encourage people that listen to this and have an interest in local government, do yourself a favor and read the material that's out there and that's available. And then ask yourself, if I'm not going to lead in the next council, if I'm not going to put my name forward, who would I suggest do that? If it's not me influencing the direction of our community that I'm going to live in for the next 20 or 30 years, then who would I recommend step up to the plate? And I think if people thought about it in those terms, they'd realize that what Canada needs is the average thinking person who has something to contribute based on past experience or based on new ideas, so that you've got a mix of older and younger. You've got a mix of lots of experience versus limited experience. You've got a mix of people that are highly articulate versus those that have difficulty expressing themselves. That's what a community is. It's a mix of all kinds of people. And if you're going to represent the community, council should look representative of that community. So I would challenge people and say there's no reason why you can't be the mayor or you can't be a councillor. Put your name out there and say, I've got some ideas that I want to share with the community. I'm supportive of where we're at today. Don't dump on your predecessors, because you eventually become one. So just stick with moving in the right direction and getting people focused with you. And I think we've got a ton of talent out there. I'm always amazed by quality people, including at my own dining room table when I've got family over, and I'm thinking, I've got 3 daughters. All 3 of them are articulate and have good ideas and could do well in government, so on and so. But to me, that should be the challenge to all of us. It's the Tucker book challenge. Like, what goes on in the community? A lot of it traces back to City Hall or district municipal office or whatever it's called in your community. So let's get people engaged in this. The fact that local government is so poorly attended during an election is, to me, a disgrace to all of us. Most people couldn't tell you what the federal government does other than the post office and national defense, and we might not do much of either one of those. Provincial government, we do healthcare and education. So what does the local municipality do? There's a whole truckload of things.
Everything else.
Your daily lives.
Yeah. So true. And the diversity and inclusion is so critical, that if our communities are going to continue to thrive and really enjoy a renaissance as we move forward. Yeah. Thank you so much, George. Amazing insights again. Congratulations on your book. Everybody, we'll put a link to where you can get the book at municipalworld.com. Wonderful read. Whether you're a mayor, considering being a mayor, or just interested in leadership, fantastic book on leadership and just being the best that you can be. I think it's a great read. Thank you again, George.
Thank you, Michael. All the best. God bless you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining the Thriving Mayor Show. Make sure to like and share and tell your friends and colleagues. Mayors are awesome and are the change agents to enhance the quality of living for over 80% of us. Remember what Coach Wooden said, you cannot live a perfect day without doing something for someone who can never repay you. Much love and peace. Until next time.